So hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Don Dixon. I'm the Senior Vice President of Global Document Outsourcing at Xerox Corporation. And this is our fourth edition of Ask the Experts. And we have two experts with us today that's going to take us through a lively conversation around how to simplify work in the enterprise. And so I'll let them introduce themselves. Louella, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Louella Fernandes. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm an Associate Director with Quocirca, which is a UK-based market research firm, and I focus primarily on understanding enterprise usage of managed print services.
Wonderful. And Michael, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hey, Don. I am Michael Krigsman. I'm an analyst and a strategy advisor to senior executives in the enterprise on use of technology and the intersection of business, technology, leadership, and innovation.
Wonderful, wonderful. We're excited to have both of you here today, and I can't wait to get into this topic about simplifying work. And so the thing that's on my mind is that industries, organizations, enterprises are all facing similar challenges around information, whether it is the digitization of that information, whether it is securing that information, whether it is automating and simplifying that information, or even taking costs out. What do you see? What has been your experiences with customers and how they face these challenges? Let's start with Michael.
Don, I think there's a tension today because organizations expect their technology to drive efficiency and to remove costs. And of course, that's a reasonable set of goals. But at the same time, these companies want their IT organization, want the CIO, want folks in IT to be driving innovation. And so sometimes we hear about the CIO as, on the one hand, the chief infrastructure officer,
right,
which implies cost reduction. Other times we hear about the CIO as being the chief innovation officer. And so there's a tension. And it's a challenge for organizations to integrate these two different roles or personas, in a sense, of the CIO and IT.
Yeah, absolutely. So Louella, could you tell me how then managed print services play a role in overcoming these information challenges? And maybe you can start by kind of setting up what is managed print services?
Sure. So many organizations today struggle to manage their print environments. And typically, an organization has a variety of different devices from different manufacturers, which means they need to control costs, manage different service contracts, software, consumables. Yeah. And this can lead to significant device sprawl, which means that it's very difficult to control costs and efficiencies. So we're seeing more and more organizations moving towards a managed print service to actually help them tackle these escalating print costs, but also drive improved productivity and efficiency as well.
Right. Yeah, right. Great. So talk to me a little bit about how do you see managed print services playing a role in helping organizations, optimize their information infrastructure, if you will.
Okay, so I think if we take a step back, today, despite the digital age, many organizations are still operating a very paper-dependent environment. So there are many paper-based processes which organizations are still very much dependent on. And an MPS can play a key role in terms of helping the digitization of these processes. And many management service engagements today allow the identification of these processes and looking for bottlenecks in manual processes, which can actually be made more efficient. So a management service platform can really play a key role in terms of optimizing these manual, inefficient processes and actually improving the integration between paper and digital workflows.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for that perspective. Information is now the lifeblood of most organizations. After all, it is the intellectual capital, right, on which many organizations run. And from my perspective, the disruptive innovation and adoption of of say, mobile technologies, or the impact that security can have in the movement of this information across the infrastructure is big, right? We have a very large, diverse workforce, and so as they go mobile, I wonder whether or not they can have the same kind of experience that you would have, say, working in a corporate environment. Work is no longer a place anymore. Michael, can you kind of talk to me about the challenges that you see enterprises and customers talking about as they look at creating, accessing, and protecting their information as, say, perhaps their mobile workforce interact with it?
I think we really need to begin with what the users want, what they expect, and actually today, what they demand. You mentioned the term workplace. In the past, the workplace was a fixed location. Everybody came to the office. Today, telecommuting is extremely common.
Yeah.
The lower airfares mean that travel is more frequent. People have home offices, they work in coffee shops, and so the user expects complete access to all of their information wherever they happen to be at that moment. So the workplace today can be any one of these different places. It can be an airplane.
Right.
But at the same time, the company needs to institute appropriate governance over security, the right type of devices so that they can manage that security. So you have this balance between managing the openness that workers expect and the availability that workers expect on the one side versus the security that the organization has to implement.
Yeah, thank you for that, Michael. And Louella, I know for a fact that this is an area, particularly mobility and security, is a big area in management service engagements today. And I know you spend a lot of time talking to customers about their experiences. And having served as a research director at a large IT research and consulting firm for over 10 years and leading research in this area, I know firsthand, having talked to those CIOs and talked to those customers myself, what their expectations are around mobility and more recently around security in particular. So could you tell us, what are your experiences and what are you hearing from your customers around requirements, as well as things that they not only would be nice to have, but they need to have?
Yeah, so we talk to a lot of enterprises in terms of trying to understand their requirements for mobility and security within broader management services engagements. And certainly, as Michael mentioned, there's a real trade-off in terms of balancing productivity as you bring more mobility into an organization, balancing that with security risks. And what we're seeing is that most mobile workers do want to have access to the same corporate applications as they've enjoyed on their laptops, which have been controlled by IT in the past. But because of the sort of bring your own device phenomenon, this has really led to a real proliferation of devices and operating systems, and it's very difficult for IT to actually manage and control this. So while they need to ensure that mobile workers remain productive by enabling them to access applications, and this actually does include printing, we believe that around 80% of mobile workers do actually want to have access to printing, even if they're not needing print all the time. It's useful to have these capabilities, and if they don't have access to those capabilities, then it does affect their productivity. So however, only about 20% of enterprises have actually deployed mobile printing already, and much of this is down to the complexity of mobile printing today, and we see a lot of changes in the industry, and one is the MOPRIA Alliance, which is bringing more standardization to mobile printing, and we believe that will actually improve mobile access to print resources over the coming year. But certainly, sort of going back to the trade-off between productivity and security, we believe that more organizations need to implement strategies such as mobile device management, authorization, authentication, and accounting to make sure that shadow IT doesn't spring up and that organizations can control what their users are doing and how they're accessing information on their mobile devices.
Yeah, you're
And
saying several things that I'm really excited about, honestly. Authorization, authentication, even accounting, and how that relates to accessing content on the go. Could you say just a few more words around the importance of being able to have the same kind of secure experience in an enterprise, as well as when you're mobile? Let's say you're working in one location in New York and you're moving, visiting another location in London, perhaps. You want to have the same access to your content as well as the security around that. Could you talk a little bit more about authenticating to the device, so the device knows who you are, and then having access rights?
Yeah, so there's there's a number of ways that can be achieved. If we consider printing in particular, there are tools such as pull printing, which enable users to actually release documents based on their authentication credentials. So they can walk up to any multifunction printer or copier within the corporate network, which allows them to release the documents based on their previously defined user credentials. And this is a real way not only of securing printing, but also minimizing wasteful printing. So rather than printing multiple copies of one document and not picking it up, it's possible to just ensure that you're only picking up the documents you've actually printed. And this also reduces environmental impact and also improves security. So full printing is really very key in terms of promoting enterprise mobility, but also ensuring security as well.
Yeah, the notion of being able to pull the document to you regardless of your location, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fantastic. So thank you for that. So businesses today have a huge opportunity to automate and simplify their paper-based business processes and introduce streamlined digital workflows. So Michael, could you talk to me a little bit about how can they best manage that transition and perhaps even introduce business intelligence into that process?
Well, as Louella mentioned, the most innovative organizations today, the ones that I speak with, who are pushing the envelope, are taking very strong proactive measures to implement these types of systems so that their workers really do have the same capabilities and the flexibility and access to information combined with security when they're out in the field. The challenge for organizations is this is requiring new layers of both technology as well as processes. So from an IT perspective, it requires a different type of thinking, which is a challenge for IT in many cases. And it's part of the innovative process. It requires change management. It requires being aware of both the end user perspective and what the end user wants. Because if not, then shadow IT, as Louella mentioned, will spring up. But at the same time, balancing the corporate needs. So really, it is a change management exercise, and some training is required, both for users and for IT.
Yeah. Are there any industries that are doing better than others? Any industries that are ripe for this kind of transition, introducing business intelligence and all of those kinds of things, and doing this better than others today?
I think industries that have traditionally been paper-based are just ripe for this. So, for example, financial services and healthcare.
Right.
But again, it requires not just technology, not just the injection of technology, but process changes. So think about healthcare, for example. To introduce electronic medical records requires that the doctor now take notes inside a terminal, whether a tablet or a laptop or whatever it is, instead of writing paper-based notes. Now it seems like maybe that's a small thing, but it is an education process for the physician.
Sure. Agreed. I have an example from some recent calls that I've been making with customers, and in the financial services sector, the account opening function is something that they do every day, and you'd be surprised. The same thing with mortgage and other kinds of paper-based business processes. What we find is that there are customers who are spending 3 to 5 to 7 days opening an account before they can actually do a transaction with a bank. And one of the things the customer said to me, it's really nice to be able to automate that whole workflow. When they come into the bank, they sit down, they fill out 2 or 3 pieces of paper. That information gets scanned. It gets moved over to a particular location where that information is extracted. A background check is done, and eventually the bank will issue, assuming you pass the background check, they'll issue an account number, and you can start doing banking with that particular branch. Now, today we have account opening instances where we've completely automated that process, taking it down from 3, 5, or even 7 days to a matter of minutes, 15, 20 minutes. The information is extracted. You walk up to the MFP. There's a button on the MFP that says account opening. Right, you put the paper down on the MFP, you press account opening, and the information is scanned in. There's software and technology behind that extracts the relevant information that is working in the behind the scenes. The background check is done, and the account number is issued right there at the branch. The customer now is able to do banking immediately, or relatively speaking, as opposed to waiting several days. That's an example of one of the ways in which customers can dramatically save time, automating paper-based business processes in their enterprises. And I'm wondering, are you seeing similar kinds of requirements from your customers in this regard?
I think
Louella, any comments on that?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that. So you talked about sort of digitization of some of these business processes, and we see this as quite key to an organization's broader big data strategy.
Yeah.
So if organizations, big data has become, a big buzzword, and more organizations are increasing their expenditure on big data and business analytics and business intelligence, as you mentioned. And often paper is overlooked in the big data picture, but by actually paying higher priority to digitization of paper documents, organizations can unlock a lot of valuable information and insights from those paper documents. And by integrating those with digital workflows, then both paper and digital information is then available for broader enterprise content management systems, and is then available for data analytics and business intelligence. So really, paper-based processes should not only be optimized, but should also play a much bigger part in a company's big data strategy as well.
Yeah, great. Michael, you had a comment you wanted to make there.
Yeah, I think that this is another example of technology driving not just cost savings and efficiency, but real value for the business. Because in a case like you were describing, where financial services is reducing the amount of time that it takes a customer to wait, that drives increased customer loyalty. It ensures that the customer actually follows through with the creation of that account rather than going to a competitor who might be able to do it faster. So I think that this notion of innovation connected with the technology as opposed to just cost savings is extremely important.
Agreed. Louella, you recently created a white paper on the importance of protecting information in an enterprise. We know that businesses today are all aware of the risks associated with PCs and servers and computer networks, but go back to the point you touched on earlier about securing intellectual property on printers and multifunction devices that are everywhere in enterprises today, because literally everybody prints, right? So talk to me a little bit more about that.
Sure. So with many businesses now are moving to a shared multifunction device environment, so they've moved away from single function devices or desktop devices where maybe it was easier to secure confidential information, and now MFPs are typically in communal areas and they're being shared between multiple users. So the opportunity for information to fall into the wrong hands, whether accidentally or maliciously, is heightened without proper print security controls. And there have been a number of incidents, particularly in the UK, where we have data protection laws against information being sent from the business that hasn't been sent to the correct recipient. And in recent months, there have been 2 quite significant fines for companies that actually failed to protect their print environment and actually sent information to the wrong recipient, and it was sensitive customer information, and it was purely by somebody picking up the wrong information at the device and sending that information with their own documents. And because this was very sensitive information, the fines were levied quite significantly on 2 local governments in the UK. And really this can be mitigated with a number of controls. And really with an MFP, there's quite a lot of security vulnerabilities. So it's not only the paper that resides in an output tray, but also information resides on the hard disk, which can be accessed if it's not overwritten, and also information can be intercepted in print queues. Probably not as common, but there are quite a number of security vulnerabilities, as you'd find on any network device connected to the network or to the IT infrastructure. So really, we're just seeing that there are significant security risks, and in recent Quocirca research, around 70% of organisations did indicate that they'd suffered at least one data breach as a result of unsecured printing.
It is a concern. It is a concern. And in talking with a lot of our large enterprise customers, this has become an increasing area of concern, given some of the public information we've heard recently around large security breaches of credit card numbers and the like. The one that I'm thinking about, or at least the idea that I have in my mind, is my wife works in a healthcare kind of a situation, and the patient onboarding kind of information and the rules we have around HIPAA has become really, really important lately, almost as strong as the Sarbanes-Oxley rules we have around financial services. I wonder if you can talk extemporaneously about the importance of those 2 regulations or those 2 initiatives in enterprises and the impact it has. Let's say, take the healthcare example. I wonder if you would have any comments on that, Michael.
Well, these types of regulations reflect the broader concerns that that Louella and you were just describing, of information loss, of information being stolen, and so forth. And so it really means that the enterprise people looking to implement distributed systems in terms of devices and so forth have to examine the entire chain and manage the entire chain, from the security at the point of the MFP all the way out to the user who has a cell phone or a tablet going through security at the airport and needing to make sure that the data that may reside, even if it shouldn't be there, but data that they may have on that device cannot be compromised.
No, that's totally right. That's totally right. So that's why we have spent a lot of time really looking at that whole value chain of security to make sure that that when a person walks up to the device, that one of the requirements that we have is this notion of authentication, right? So when you authenticate the device, whether it's through a badge reader or a PIN code, the device and ultimately the network knows who you are, and so your interaction with the device and the network from that point on is recorded, and we really have a clear understanding of what you're doing with information at the device, on the device, over the network, and as information falls out of the network onto an output device, we are tracking that and knows who's doing what on the network. So this explosion, this information capital explosion, if you call it, both in electronic form, in paper form, in enterprises, has become a real challenge, right? So the thing that keeps me up at night is, how do we unlock that explosion of data, of information, and make it useful for enterprises? The management of it becomes an issue. It exists in so many places and forms. I wonder if we are giving organizations the right access at the right place, doing the right thing with the information, and is it being leveraged in the right way? That's what we're spending all of our time thinking about. And so ultimately, we believe harnessing that information and streamlining workflows, giving CIOs, if you will, the ability to concentrate on what they do best. I had a CIO most recently in Europe tells me, they say, the better you do your job, the less I will have to be working with printers and networks. I want to go back to doing pharmaceutical work, because it was a pharmaceutical company that we were talking to. And that really resonated with me. If we're doing what we do best, then they can do what they do best. And so I want to really thank both of you for this lively conversation. It's been a real pleasure talking to both of you. Thank you for your input. And I want to thank everyone on the web joining us as well for a real exciting conversation around simplifying work in the enterprise. So if you would like more information about simplifying work in your enterprise, we invite you to point your browser over to www.xerox.com and search under Managed Print Services, and you'll find lots of good information there. And with that, I want to say thank you all for joining, and thank you, Louella, thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody on the web.